two very interesting presentations that just preceded this one, which basically kind of talked about most of the things that I wanted to talk about. So it makes my job much easier, although I try to remain interested. So I'm going actually, the scope of the interest where I'm doing my PhD work currently falls really in line of the two previous presentations, but I'm going to go a little bit more on a kind of atomic low level of a certain kind of aspect of dealing with data. And I think anybody who did any work with grounded theory or constant comparison will be really familiar with this. And I encourage you actually to be really critical and kind of push some kind of sensitive questions regarding the challenges of data analysis. So I'm going to demonstrate a case from Syria, the one that I'm working on in my PhD study. And it is actually a local community of voluntary students that mostly, not exclusively, but mostly reside in Damascus, in the capital of Syria. And what they do is that, this is one of their activities. It's, for example, a weekly talk that they do. Each week they would gather, and one of the students would give a lecture about an interesting topic that that student would decide as interesting, and that it actually collected enough interest within and momentum within the community, and then they would come together to a hall, and then the student would present this kind of topic to the other students. And then the cycle continues. Each week a different student from the community members would come to present a different thing. They also do things like collaborative workshops. So the previous thing was just one-to-many kind of presentation, the thing that I'm doing right now. Here sometimes they gather after these kind of whatever they were presenting, and they would write content together about the concept that they were presenting or the ideas. So in the photo that I showed you at the beginning, the presentation, there was a student in medicine presenting the concept of e-health to other students within the community. And the community consists of multiple interest groups. So some of them are studying medicine, so they're interested in medicine. Others are in computer science, they're interested in informatics. Others study computer engineering, so they're interested in hardware tinkering. So after the presentation, sometimes they would gather together and then write content online about what they have seen, and then collect more information. And through this kind of writing process, they learn more about the topic, they collect resources, and they write content in Arabic. So this content is also presentable to the online public. So through this activity, through this kind of collaborative, educational, voluntary activity, they produce a number of online artifacts as a product, as a purpose. They are encouraged by this fact. They are happy when they have their content finished and polished and posted online, and at the same time it's part of their learning process. So they use Facebook a lot to communicate with each other, to organize the activities, to suggest topics for the next week, to actually celebrate the topic that they presented and it succeeded, and they post more resources and continue the discussion online. And they also produce wiki content. So for example, just the workshop that I showed you in the previous slide, this was a product of that workshop where here they're writing about a certain form of a computer club called the Fab Lab. I don't know if some of you heard about this. So it's kind of a collaborative space for hardware enthusiasts to come together and do hardware projects together, design electronic circuits and link sensors and things that buzz and blink. And so basically they're writing about this concept because they are excited, especially the ones in the community who are excited about hardware tinkering. They are interested in this concept, so they're exploring the idea of creating a Fab Lab. While they're exploring the idea, they're generating content to the public. So they have that kind of alternative wiki space where it's the MediaWiki software, but it's not the Wikipedia. There they would actually just develop articles. If an article is mature enough in Arabic, they will actually migrate it to the Arabic Wikipedia. They also use blogs. This blog post is about, also by the hardware tinkering group, it's about just manufacturing simple jumper wires just to connect two parts of an electronic circuit. They use personal messaging, so it's just like email in Facebook, which makes sense. I mean, they exploit several kinds of personal to public channels of communication. And the way that I'm actually, so this was what they were doing, what I'm doing with them is that over the course of the project, I tried as much as possible to become a member with them from the beginning. So the way that I approached, it happened by accident, like many good things in life. So I got to know them. I didn't even think that there was going to be any research on this topic on my part. I was already a member with them. But then what I would do when I actually decided with my supervisors that I would focus on this kind of topic to see what they're working on, how they're utilizing online tools and media to self-organize and collaborate together and communicate what works well and what doesn't to inform design. So this will be the other part. I'll get there. So when I decided to do that, I needed some kind of a protocol. So I didn't really have a protocol, but now I can kind of pin it down a little bit more clearly. So what I would do is that I would hang out in the public square, which would be part of their public squares is a Facebook group where they just hang out together. It's not like the Facebook group is where all the activities happen, but it's definitely where if an activity happens, everybody knows about it on Facebook. And then it's a space where they can discuss what happened, what will happen, and they can reflect and also kind of announce the future activities. So from there I would participate also in the discussions they're doing. If they have an online activity I can participate in, then I can do that. I visited them once in Damascus. Afterwards I couldn't because of the situation in Syria. So this also limited my ability to visit their on-ground activity to see what's happening offline. But still, part of their activity was online, so I was able to follow up with that online. And then I would use this kind of being a member with them, being able to participate as a pivot to kind of collect data. So just by the virtue of being a member and participating in discussions, these discussions are the data, basically, which informs me and us about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And this lasted for a year. I'm still a member with them. So basically I've been for over 2 years, but really serious data collection lasted for 1 year. So the data is basically what I already showed you. Every kind of online content or interaction that I can reach, I try to take a record of, which includes online Facebook discussions on Facebook groups, their content that they generate on wikis, their blog posts, any kind of private discussions that I have access to. I mean, sometimes I'm not privileged enough to be in certain kind of circles, but on the other hand, also sometimes they allow me, or just by the virtue of being a member, we discuss things sometimes privately. I also keep a record of that. And also on addition of that, something that I personally then generate is just writing lots and lots of daily notes and weekly notes that summarize what was going on during the day. And this is very, very typical of anybody who's doing ethnographic work, is writing lots of daily notes that document the happenings. So this kind of data collection and writing notes, at the end of the day, it produces large numbers of stories, and here I'm calling them narratives. I'm going to show you 2 stories, which it's a little bit hard to show all the pieces of data that construct these narratives, so I'm going to show them in a simplified sketch form that I sketch by my hand. And since, let's go to the core focus of the presentation as a whole, the purpose is to talk about comparison of data pieces. It's how to tease out meaning by comparing data pieces together. So I'm going to show 2 narratives, 2 stories, and then compare them, and then show how very, very simple comparison can yield out very useful concepts that you can use further, either to present to other people, because when you're presenting something, when you're presenting your research, you're condensing definitely the kind of data that you're having from the field. So it's very useful to condense your stories into something presentable. At the same time, it condenses the data that you observe towards certain patterns and concepts that are useful for you if you want to do design. If you want to translate this into a new design of design. How much time do I have still? Okay. So let's go to the stories. The stories are about two groups forming within the community, emerging from the state of not having a group with a name to a state of people coming together and forming a new group or a subgroup within the community. So this example we have at the beginning, it was at the end of 2011, beginning 2012. We had already a group that's called Open Hardware. So they are people that are, it's a subgroup within the community that is interested, these are the ones who are interested in hardware tinkering. And they had a Facebook group. At the same time, they had another Facebook group, which is in the shade. Not everybody is in there as a member, and its purpose was just managing the main group. So here moderators will come together and discuss what are we going to do in the main group. What kind of activities are we going to suggest? And how are we going to motivate members? So this was it is always a very critical question. How are we going to get things going, basically? So at the beginning, between the 2000 here, maybe I can use it later, between 2011, the end of it, and the middle of 2012, they were in the form of establishment. They were having lots of problems with getting actual resources. They were interested in a certain electronic board that's called the Arduino, and it's a circuit board that enables you, as somebody who's a really beginner in electronics, just to link it to the computer and then connect sensors and buzzers. So it enables somebody who doesn't know anything about electronics to start circulating this between them. And this resulted in some members of them doing a couple of very simple but cool projects, like if you get if you get a new email on your Gmail, it will kind of buzz and light on your desktop. So what they did is that they took this project and they presented it in an open talk to the whole community, the one that I showed you at the beginning. And what this happened, it generated so much interest that it resulted in a new group forming. So new people came from this community, the mother community you can call it, and then formed a new group which is called Fab Lab, which is also interested in open hardware, but they were interested into doing tangible projects, not only learning about open hardware online and collecting resources about that, but also doing tangible projects offline, on ground, in Damascus. And they did that, and the first thing that they did, now they had enough people actually that are interested to buy the Arduino or to communicate with somebody outside of the country, so they would be able to bring the Arduino board in Syria. And that's what they did, and then the first activity that they did actually was doing a workshop on the Arduino board. So that was the story of the first community or the subgroup, Fab Lab, emerging within the community. Now the second one started from the actual mother group of the community. It's the biggest group in the community. It's called Ideas Worth Spreading. What they do mainly is they do this weekly presentation activity, weekly talks. And from there, they have also a Facebook group, and they would announce what activities are going there. They would post the event announcement on the Facebook group, and they would also kind of reflect and post pictures afterwards when the presentation or the talk ends. So the conversation keeps going. And from there, there were members from Aleppo. So Damascus is in the south, where most of the community members are. Aleppo is in the north. So there were members from Aleppo that were interested into bringing, and still are interested in bringing, the Wikilogia experience. So the community, the whole community is called Wikilogia. They're interested into bringing their experience up to the north, to Aleppo. So they started kind of a small thread of discussion on Facebook that we want to do this, and then the moderators in Wikilogia and Damascus were interested into making this happening. So they started a private kind of thread of discussion on Facebook that's basically everybody introducing themselves and thinking about how can we make this happen? Where is a good place to do that? What's the starting activity that we can start with? And then this private discussion when it kind of matured enough, they formed a Facebook group that's called Wiki4 towards Wikilogia Aleppo. So it's not really the community being established in Aleppo yet, but it's a group that cares about establishing a group in Aleppo. For now, actually, this was in middle 2013. Since then, the situation really intensified in Aleppo, and infrastructure and communication was completely unreliable, and safety was not there, so it's now on hold. But from some time to time, they go back and discuss this issue. So now these are two narratives of two kind of groups of communities coming towards existence from a mother community. Now we come to the comparison. And if anybody is interested in doing comparison of qualitative data, you can go to Corbin and Strauss, where they speak about grounded theory. So I'm not going to speak about whole of grounded theory. For that, you go to the black belt, as Lorenzo Cantoni yesterday said in grounded theory. I'm going to speak about specific technique that's often popular in grounded theory, which is constant comparison. So by comparing these two data pieces or two narratives, the main thing that I would have that occurred to me when aligning them together is that in both cases we have a mother group. There's an activity that happens in the mother group, and then this activity sometimes generates enough interest to create a new group. And then the new group, the first thing that they would do is actually do activity to kind of bring in new members. So we have kind of two dynamics that's going on here. We have that in order to bring the group into existence, you have to do some action, which sounds kind of straightforward, but here you get to see the details that's going on and the dynamics of this and how it translates to how it happens online. So for a group to get into existence, you need to kind of an activity to encourage people to come together on a certain time and place and focus their attention on this activity, and then they would come together and form a new group. And then for a new group or for an already old established group to persist over time, they need to keep doing activities. So there is no clear distinction between a group of people collaborating or voluntary people collaborating together and activity. They're almost synonyms together. Because for a group to exist, it needs activity, and for activity to exist, it needs a group of people that come together. So what happened? So this kind of pattern that came out, which is, of course, it's very simple. It's just from two cases. We can imagine that this gets enriched as long as you keep comparing with new narratives that come from your fieldwork, and this can continue over a long stretch that you can decide, or as much as you didn't have enough yet. So you end up with a group of these concepts that can, then I have, for my project itself, I have a design motivation behind the project. So I want also to contribute this to the status quo through designing something with the community. So for me, what this tells me about design is that, it's also very simple translation, is that the flow between activities and groups is always there. The community groups are having some issues with the way that, for example, the tools that they're using, like Facebook, manages groups and events. So the way that they use event pages to organize activities was evolving over time. There's always kind of a need or frustration that is reflected in the fact is that you cannot bring members' attention enough towards a specific activity if you use an event page. So one idea that emerged from discussing with them is that, is there a way, for example, to morph the group page of Facebook towards an activity page altogether? Not only create an event and post it on the group, but to morph the group page into an activity page, and then there you would have the tools that are required for an activity like discussion, posting photos, tweeting within that page. And then when the activity ends, we need to get back to our Hangout public space. So is there a way also to morph back to a relaxed state where you actually don't have an activity going on? So this itself, for me, it's a very interesting concept that one can explore further through design, which, again, was uncovered by doing this kind of one-to-one comparison between cases. I'm going to skip, I think this is the last thing that I have. Yes, so as a conclusion, comparison is a very kind of straightforward and rewarding way to tease out common patterns and variations between databases. I have a typo. And then these also can inform design concepts if you are interested in design. If not, it's also useful and rewarding if you want just to report your research outcomes in the form of concepts and categories. Thank you very much. I hope you have